Hello, my fellow storytellers. You are about to learn amazing storytelling insights from the brilliant Mike Jones, a driving force at Pixar Animation Studios and co-writer of Soul and Luca, two of my favorite Pixar films. Mike's storytelling craft goes beyond the amazing scripts he has written. He is now a senior story and creative artist at the studio. Get ready to discover how to write great dialogue, why starting with your story theme might be a terrible mistake, how your most personal moments can inspire your story, and how facing your own Bruno can lead to storytelling magic. And if you dream of working at Pixar, watch until the end because Mike has invaluable tips for you. Mike Jones, welcome to Write for Animation. It is so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
I would love to hear what is your process in general and specifically at Pixar.
The writer at Pixar is really has several different functions, and it depends on what stage the project is at. So, for instance, on Soul, Doctor had a few ideas on what he wanted to do. He had a world that he wanted to build, but he didn't have a story, and so I came in really early on, and we just sat in a story room for months, for years, just on a cork board, just pinning it out, just trying to find out where the story really sang to what he was trying to build. And so in that regard, I served as more of kind of a brainstorming, collaborator. And then eventually when it started to kind of lock into something, that's when the writing kind of changes into more outlining, then it changes into script writing. And then even after that, as Pixar's process, which I'm sure, your audience knows probably pretty well, but Pixar, we board all of the movies and make them again and again and again. And then we get notes and we tear it all down, sometimes mostly down, sometimes partly down, and then we rewrite and go back. So that's a different area for the writer there, is to kind of try to maintain that line, to try to take the notes that you've gotten from your peers and to try to just continue to make the movie better and better, more clearer and more focused. And more meaningful and more entertaining and emotional.
That what I think makes the process of animation magical compared to like getting to your cave, writing your script, and then you turn it to the producer or whoever is involved in the film. The fact that we get to see the reels. And I know that now you have a role that goes beyond the specific movies that you are writing.
Development sometimes will bring me into various projects just to hear pitches or to work with the writer. What I like to do is I like to kind of be a person all the writers here can come to and talk about what the process is and what the process involves, because the process for a writer here is unlike any other studio in the world, really. And it goes down to that iteration process. It goes down to the fact that we can make our movies again and again and again over the course of 5 years. And that's the great, advantage that we have, is that I feel if any movie had 4, 5, 6 years to continually reshoot and remake itself again and again to try to get better every time, then those movies would be great too, or good, right? So we're trying to do the same thing. For instance, some of the writers that come in here, that process is foreign. I don't think it doesn't really even map to a TV writer, for instance. And we've had many TV writers here before. So it's just I like to kind of guide the writer through what's expected, and also just have that writer realize that it's such a collaborative process here that no good idea is shown the door. Every good idea is used, and to really embrace that idea that it can come from anywhere.
And is it something that you experimented like a difference between early on in your career?
Yeah, yeah. So before this, I was a screenwriter for the studios for about 20 years. And my first job was working for Henry Selick. And that's the kind of first time I got to really understand this iterative process, because Henry also worked in that same mode. And then from there, I stepped into Pixar and I just never left. I
Mhm.
I really loved it. I find that there's a wonderful time in all of these movies where the ego starts to drip away, where people stop feeling possessive of their own ideas and start to really want the movie to be better. They're here for the movie and they're here for the message of the movie. And that happened on Soul, that happened on Luca. Every time that happens, it allows people to be in sync a little more with each other and a little bit more with what we're all trying to make, right? in the early stages, it's kind of white. It's, you know, it's blue sky. It's what can we do here? What we can do here? And, you know, that's another kind of job of the writer as it gets, as the years go by, as the months get by, as it starts solidifying, there is always this desire to keep on changing it, which is something that you have to embrace. But also as the writer, you're supposed to kind of maintain what the story is trying to say from the beginning, middle, and end. And that's a challenge sometimes. You know, that's a challenge anywhere, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Are there roles throughout the process where maybe some other writers or consultants get into the studio? This is a question I have because we absolutely love the process of writing for animation. But at the same time, at the entry level, it's hard to
Mhm.
get into any big studio without artistic skills.
You know, Pixar picks its writers as most film studios do, and that is through representation. They don't just on the writers' end of things, they don't accept unsolicited material, and there's all sorts of like legal
Yep.
reasons which I'm not totally familiar with. But within Pixar, within the teams that make up all of these different productions, like I said before, good ideas can come from kind of anybody, story artists, editors, animators, production designers, asset builders. On all the productions I've been to, particularly Pete's productions, Pete Doctors, he wants all of that. So you don't have to necessarily be a writer to feel you can contribute to these films. To be part of the team is kind of the gateway into it. And you know, like I said, there's only, you know, maybe five or six, a handful of writers working here at one given time, but there's hundreds of story artists, there's hundreds of animators, there's, you know, the editing department is huge. So there's other ways of the sound design department, like there's other ways of getting your kind of artistic voice into Pixar movies. It's just you kind of have to get in. And it's
Okay.
hard.
Yeah.
They've been part of any sort of the selection process in terms of like recruiting at all, but I bet it's hard. You know.
But it's
But keep
it's
trying. I will also say
mhm.
if the people that I've heard that have gotten into Pixar, whether they're story artists or animators or something, like they might apply once and then get rejected, but it's really the fourth or fifth or sixth time as
Right.
they grow their portfolio, as they grow their voice, as they hone down what their true kind of tone of their art is, like that will start to be heard. Pixar is looking for unique and special voices
Mhm.
because we're not looking to make the same animated film over and over again. And that requires a whole level of inclusion and diversity. So I would encourage everybody, just keep applying. Just
Mhm.
be annoying about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Rejection is a part of being an artist. Like if you don't have any rejection, I don't know that you're doing it right. I have
Exactly.
been rejected. I'm still rejected over and over and over again. And practicing that muscle of taking the rejection, licking your wounds, hearing the note, making it better, and keeping on going, that's the kind of life of an artist. And so that's also part, I would imagine, of the, you know, application process at Pixar.
Right. I've heard you sharing how you got inspired by the death of your father during the production of Soul, which was very touching moment. I wanted to hear a little bit about that because that's such a beautiful moment that I think that it can show how powerful it is to really tap into even the things that
Mm.
are difficult to face in life, expressing them through a story.
Yeah. Well, Soul was interesting because both Pete and I were kind of joined at the hip early on. And so what we knew is that we knew that weren't qualified to make a movie that explained what the meaning of life is, which is really kind of what Soul explores, right? Soul explores what is the meaning of a life when you face it, when you're facing death, essentially. What are you going to miss? What makes it worthwhile? What makes it fulfilled? And we knew that we started kind of surrounding ourselves with this idea that maybe there is no answer to the meaning of life. Maybe there is no meaning necessarily. That actually life itself is the meaning, that living life is its own meaning. And it doesn't need to be defined in words or written down in a book. It's the action of life. And we kind of like that idea, but we kind of didn't know how to put that into action, right? So I could write that and I could explain it on a podcast, but in a movie, like you need to make that into action. And we didn't know how to do it. We tried and tried, and then midway through the movie, my father passed away. And before he passed away, he was very sick. And so I would fly into Texas, where I'm from, and be with him and hold his hand. And then I was with him when he passed, and I was holding him as he passed. And something kind of clicked in me a little bit later to think about, like, what is he thinking as he passes away? What are his last thoughts? Is it about the accomplishments that he had in life, about, like, his resume, about his wealth? And I kind of thought no. I thought he probably would be happy to be here with his son, who's holding him as he passes away. And so it's those little moments that started to kind of snowball into an idea that maybe it's all of the small little things, that maybe when Joe brings out all of those objects that 22 is collected, that is actually the meaning, right? And he puts it all on the piano, and he plays that score Epiphany that the composers composed so beautifully, and John Batiste performed, that ends up triggering other little moments that then kind of give him an answer that really can't be necessarily described, that has to be felt. My father's death it made me very sad, but it also just gave me a kind of a great gift, a great window into another layer of how to tell the story. And I came back, after he passed. I pitched this idea. I think I wrote those pages within a couple of weeks. And I talked to Pete about it, and he was on board. And so that's where that moment happened. But yeah, you're really looking for those moments. But again, you're looking for the moments on how it can be animated. And animation is action, essentially. So
that is beautiful. And you touched upon the epiphany and the theme. What is the moment about in a film? How would you help a writer understand that moment in a film?
oh, I would discourage any writer from starting at a place of theme. I would never go into writing a story. I would never go into the blank page by saying, I want to do this theme. What's most important to me, and I would argue most important to Pixar, is that you find two characters that have something about them that are alive in your head, and that their interaction together takes the story into this other realm that makes it entertaining and emotional, that then the theme starts to emerge. So I would say in the writing of it, the theme always, one of our famous examples is Inside Out, right? So Inside Out for years was about joy and fear lost in the mind world, right? And I think, Pete, I didn't personally work on that movie, but I talked to Pete a lot about it. He said, like, it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. Something wasn't working, right? But you needed to go through that process in order to get to, oh, it's not fear, it's sadness. That Riley needs to feel sad, and that she can't protect Riley from it because it's providing something that joy can't provide. And that's a sense of catharsis. That's a sense of, like, it's okay to be sad. And so that came much later in the development of Inside Out. And the same with Soul. I think, like I said before, we weren't going to try to write a story about the meaning of life, but we didn't quite know what it was going to say. But we did know through the iteration of it that we wanted Joe to take 22's hand and guide her and jump with her down to earth. It's that great leap, right, that she's always been afraid to take. And he helps her, right? In the beginning of the movie, he just wants to get back to his body and play the jazz at the jazz club with Dorothea. In the end, he kind of gives it up, and he helps 22 live. And that was found through just rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and seeing where those characters take us, right? So I think, like, it's also just such a burden to think I have to write this movie about a theme. I
Yeah.
think for me, it would be totally overwhelming. I would lock
Mhm.
up. I wouldn't know where to
Yeah.
start with
More
that.
of a research of the truth or the theme, and it's also the risk of being preachy if you set yourself up
Hmm.
for a message, and in the case. So there's one moment that I loved about Luca. I'm Italian, and I absolutely loved that movie. It's amazing. Throughout the movie, I was like thinking about my childhood in Italy. Anyway, but a moment is Silenzio Bruno. It's interesting to learn how it came to be, but even more so how that applies as a writer, because after watching the movie, I thought, okay, this is my new mantra as a writer in the industry. Silenzio Bruno, keep writing, keep going. And so I want to hear a little bit, how do you face, your Bruno, who's your Bruno, and as a writer, and were you able to silence him over your career, or what do you do when you're blocked or you feel like you're not ready to move forward?
Yeah. Oh, well, Silenzio Bruno is fun. That is something that was in the movie even before I came onto it. And that was kind of a invention of the first writer, Jesse Andrews, who I worked with, and Enrico. And when I came on board, I felt we're not taking that out because it's just wonderful. It's just a beautiful thing. Like there were a lot of things that were already working so well on Luca before I came, including the ending where, those two boys like say goodbye. But I feel like I face my Bruno like every single day. And most of the Bruno in my head is that are people going to be moved by this, or is this something redundant? Is this something we've already seen? I think with every writer, like you're particularly in animation, sometimes you're kind of led toward cliche, and the fear of like resorting to a cliche in order to get to that emotion quicker is so tempting that the Bruno in my head will constantly tell me like, it's just a cliche. Like it's just a cliche. We've done that before. Like they did that before in Toy Story 3. They did that before in Up, right? Like that kind of stuff. Like, so how do I turn it off? God, I don't know. I think it's what helps me a lot is music. I do playlists for every single project I'm on, and I do extensive playlists that go into that make me feel like this is the playlist that my characters would feel if they heard, right? Just that it sets a tone for a project. And so I listen to a lot of music that helps me. And sometimes I just don't write. Sometimes you don't need to write. Sometimes there's a time to write and there's a time just to incubate. There's a time just to read. And there's a time to like go into other people's story rooms and see what they're working on and help them out, right? So this is also probably another Bruno is this fear of that you always need to be creating, you always need to be writing, you always need to get to that next level. I think now that I'm a bit older, that fear is kind of receded a bit, that I know that when I'm fallow and it's time to go, it's time to go absorb the world. Like we can kind of get stuck in our cages a little bit, right? Like even Pixar, like we have a beautiful campus in Emeryville, but that's not the world. We need to get out into the world, right? I think it's about revitalizing a little bit. And sometimes revitalizing is not writing at all.
Now I'm going to ask Mike a question from Terry. Terry is one of our Patreon members, and if you also want to join a community of passionate storytellers and bring your career to the next level, join today from writeforanimation.com/academy. I cannot wait to meet you in our next session. And Terry asks, what is the key to mastering dialogue and finding the perfect thing for a character to say?
Hmm. For me, I always try to have the character not say what they feel. I always try to have the character act what they feel, and what they say is sometimes a lie. That makes sense. Like, I feel like sometimes the way that, and particularly maybe in my upbringing, people never really said how they felt. They kind of acted how they felt. Their body language would give something, and they would say something different that would be that even in the lie, you would kind of find the truth about it. So I don't know. I always try to find dialogue that the characters are never truthful in what they say. Not never, but many times because I feel that's more human. Like I feel like I understand that person more, right? So I early on I always kind of adopted that cadence from all of my uncles in South Texas, where it's kind of talking around the emotion or it's hiding the emotion and finding ways for that emotion to peek out. I'll say the audience mostly doesn't want to be led by the nose into emotional sequences. They want to feel they're discovering something, They want to feel like they're uncovering something. And I would also urge every writer out there that it's your duty to surprise the audience. And the first person, if you are able to surprise yourself in your dialogue, in your scene structure, in the way that you write, then 9 times out of 10 will surprise the audience. So I go by
Okay,
that a lot.
can you think about a specific example to share this idea?
Hmm. Let's see. First few sequence of Soul, and Joe, he gets his wish. He's gonna play with Dorothea Williams that night. He's got to go get a suit. He's talking to people on the phone. He dies by falling into a manhole, and he ends up in the great beyond. And beforehand, the slide walk to the bright light, right? And he looks at the bright light, and it's beautiful, and it's stunning, it's awe-inspiring, and you think like, God, what's beyond that? Can't wait to go in there. That's probably great. Like, oh, is Pixar going to show us what's beyond the white light? And part of me said like, no, he's going to turn and he's going to run. He's going to no, I don't want to know what's in paradise at all. Like, I want to get back to my life. Like, so there's a surprise there, like where he just like faced with the immensity of life and faced with maybe knowing what all the answers are behind that great white light, he says, no, I'm leaving. I can't do it. I'm gonna go. I want to get back to my life because I had it. Like I had it. I was gonna play with Dorothea Williams. That's a character here it's so much more important to him to fulfill his life in his old model that he's not able to see even the immensity of what the answers of life are if he goes through that great white light. And so that's where I remember writing that and going like, oh, like, and I remember writing it and having so much fun because he runs back and everybody's like, where are you going? I don't think you're supposed to be going that way. He goes like, I got to get back. And everybody else is like, why? Like this, look at that. It's great. He's like, I'm getting back. Suddenly, like the character's alive, right? And suddenly the audience is like, where is this going? Like they're totally surprised. So in surprising myself with that, like I felt like that kind of translated into the audience as well. See, I think also once you find your character, the great thing is sometimes that character will start talking on their own. Like sometimes that character, like you don't even need to, do a whole lot of pushing. You just have to give them obstacles and to see how they react. And sometimes, maybe most of the time, they don't react well. They said, no, I'm not doing that. They react selfishly. They react egotistically, right? And while maybe the audience might, be rubbed the wrong way, that's very human. And I think everybody kind of can it makes that character very human. So that's Joe, right? In that kind of egotistical, like, no, I'm not going to go in to that great collective in the sky. I'm going to follow my ego and play with Dorothea Williams. People laughed, and they also go like, oh yeah, I could see that. So
that's awesome. That's a great way to end. And thank you so much, Mike.
That's a pleasure.
Now keep learning from Pixar storytellers by clicking on this playlist I put together for you. I'm Pietro, this is WFA Animation, and I'll see you in the playlist.